It's another episode of Feed the Trolls, and we are still in roster mania. We're going to be talking all about Team Liquid today, but first to introduce our guest, fl0m is with us. I'm so excited to have you here. All that knowledge, and you get to chat about Team Liquid. Are you ready for this, fl0m? You ready to break down everything we're going to be speaking about?
I think so. If we're talking about Liquid, I'm a bit worried, though. I don't know. It's going to be a long episode, I think.
That's
We're
why we
ready for
picked
it,
you, though.
don't
We
worry.
want someone who's invested and has to actually
Yeah,
care. Because
yeah.
I have to say,
Unfortunately.
I often have to point this out on shows. Like I do, for example, in League of Legends, obviously everyone who's in the English-speaking language is always doing things like, what is the health of the LCS? And I have to remind people sometimes, I don't actually have to give a fuck. I'm not American, mate. Like, it'd be cool if it's good, but I don't have like the same drive that it needs to be awesome. So I feel like here's the difference: is I can take all Team Liquid if I don't like the lineup, but you on some level you have to care if you're North American. This is one of the great franchises, right?
Yeah, it's one of the few. We have two basically right now. So, I mean, that's where we got to work with what we got. And it's not pretty
indeed.
right now. So,
Indeed.
You don't have a lot based on what's happened here at Liquid. I was going to set this all up. We were going to break all the things down, but I started thinking long and hard, and I wonder if we're not all just being long conned by Team Liquid here, because there are so many pieces that have been changed going into the second half of the season with Liquid. So many variables that if it does fail, it is impossible to call anyone out as to what was the failing. That's where we're sitting right now, because obviously we got a new coach, we got a change in IGL, we got two new players, we got a complete unknown player coming in, we've got someone else coming in off the bench. It's such an easy way to put your hands up if this doesn't work and go, oh, well, what were we going to do? This is what we have to expect.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It feels like, actually, if you think about it, it's almost like the start of the year. They're just running it back on it, just without the star power, right? You had all these different pieces. It's like, oh, but like the back of your head, you're like, but these names, maybe they can make it all work. This seems to, like, there's a lot of things that have to come together, but it just didn't. And then now we have the Wish version of that team. We got a lot of different versions of, sure, yeah, if this fails, like, who do you even blame? I don't know. I think Twistzz is IGLing. I don't know. Is YEKINDAR going to IGL again? Maybe. Like, I don't know what's happening, and I think you're absolutely right. By the end of it, we're all going to just be like, well, I don't know who's the problem. Like, let's just go off the stats. Like,
I
Twistzz
feel,
looks
though,
good.
like that's almost like the feature, not the bug of this lineup, though. Like, it feels like the reason they intentionally did all these, like, scuffed moves all at once is because then, crucially, like, the one name they don't want to lose value is Twistzz. Like, he was their best player. He's clearly the player they're catering to and building around. And obviously, they hope, I've heard behind the scenes, he could have been in Vitality in those teams again. Like, they obviously hope he stays here for, like, 5 years. So, in a way, I actually think it's sort of like a good problem to have, that everything could look scuffed while he's trying to be IGL. But it means he just like if you'd have taken the same lineup and just made him IGL and kept Cadian, then like if it failed, everyone would say he failed, wouldn't they? So I feel like in a way you're also insulating him by having all these other things could go wrong. Like obviously if the ultimate guy's crap or JKS doesn't play well, these factors will immediately sort of like mean he doesn't get blamed. So in a way for Team Liquid, there might even be a reason they've done it this way cynically.
Maybe I don't know.
Maybe. You said that they're building around Twistzz, though, but like it's not like they got some proper bricks and cements and put it down. You mentioned ultimates. It's like some straw and string and maybe a few sticks. No one knows anything about this guy. And I did another show with someone who actually commentates a lot of the tier 2 and tier 3 scene. And he was like, I don't know what the hell they're doing. If you go look at his stats.
Okay.
Yeah, he was like, go look at the guy's stats and then take away Dust 2 and like, good God, why did they do this? And then he gave me a list of like 10 other AWPers I'd never heard of, all from like tier 2, tier 3, where he was like, they're all better. So let's go straight into the ultimate pickup. Like, what is that? Was this a matter of there was just nothing else on the table? Was it a money issue? Why do we think they think that ultimate is the AWPer for Liquid? Thorin?
Put it this way, this is one of those moves also where normally I either have my own guys. Like if people don't know, sometimes on my streams I bring on a guy called King T, whose whole specialty, he's from the UK, is trying to like find the next prospects. He even has a series called Prospects. And by the way, over the years, he's done a very good job. Like he found people like Exertions that are way before they were ever in the Mouse main team and stuff like that. He had all these players on the way up. Like these sorts of people, most of them have never heard of this player. Like the biggest shock of all is when you even mention him, you have to usually mention like, oh, a few years ago he was on AGO. Like that's what people remember. They go, oh, I vaguely remember the AGO team with more famous players. So no, the weirdest thing about this one is like to give a contrast, even though because it's NIP, everyone hated on NIP's more recent moves. When they signed that Wrinkle guy, I had heard that hype about that guy though. There was a few people who were like, hey, maybe actually he is pretty good, and if he doesn't end up on this team, he will go to another team. I've literally never heard of this Ultimate guy. Like when someone refreshed my memory, said he was on AGO and EPL or whatever it's. I think it was the one that FaZe won in like the beginning of 2022. I went back and it was like, oh yeah, he was actually. Now, I guess he did have like one game against Vitality or something. He was all right, but like I've not only never heard of this player, I never heard him ever on any of the little shortlists like you're saying, or with like underground hype, as you might say. And more importantly, this is actually one thing I think is really conspicuous, is if you actually think you have signed someone like Wrinkle, who might be an ex-top talent or might one day be, I think you would brag about it. I think that would be part of your like materials as you announce the player. It would be like, hey, guys, we've basically got like a Monacy. We've got like some stud player who's like, this is the great. They don't even seem to have done that themselves. They're almost just sort of quietly like, JKS is here, ladies and gentlemen. JKS, JKS. Like, oh, and also Ultimate Tin. It's like, isn't it Ultimate the AWPA, bro? Like, I'm supposed to believe in your vision here, Liquid. I'm supposed to believe you got some sick scouting guy who has found the next shit hot talent, and it's just us plebs who don't know he's good. So I just find it a bit weird that they're not picking him up, because I also feel for real, like they're sort of setting him up so that like if in 3 months he isn't here, it just won't be a big deal. It was never like a big splash to something. I'm a little bit worried about that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's just a stopgap. I don't have a strong opinion about him, but like that's a terrible thing too. Like I don't sure. like you guys don't. I don't know anything about him. I'm not gonna pretend like I've been sitting here trying to study his demos to see what he's doing, because he's been playing against teams that I just quite frankly don't care about, because that's not who he's gonna be playing in the server right now. And that jump, when you're talking about offers, like to go from good to great, you basically go from a solid player to you are immediately in top 20, top 10 player conversation. That's the nature of the op. If you make that jump, you go from that type of player. And so what you're doing, like you better be dominating. And I mean, his stats are like not bad, but like they're not anything spectacular. I just, this move to me just like screams, we didn't know who to pick up. We're taking a chance on a player, and we're just going to wait until the next rotation and see who's available. It might be a money thing. I think that in general, this was more of just told to me off the cuff, and it wasn't like meant to be public type of thing, but it was, I think they were really invested in Cadian long term and organization wise, which is kind of funny considering how everything's dissolved. But I just don't think they were ready to for this at all. I don't think they were scouting anyone. This wasn't like, this was a, oh shit, panic, and we gotta, just completely 180 on what we were doing. And I think he's a stopgap. He might do well for them, sure. Like I hope. I mean, I don't really pray on someone's downfall. I hope he does well for the team, but I don't see it. I think in 6 months or when the next rotation goes through, they'll probably drop him and see who's available next. I think that's the only logical way you can even justify the move.
Doesn't that seem so cruel to this player though? Because he's new to. I mean, there's a whole step he's missing. I compare him a lot to Icy with Cloud9, where like you kind of saw the progression. You saw him do some good stuff. Kind of his name was in the mix. So now he's taken that step up into tier 1, and you go, okay, cool. Like this is your chance. I feel like Ultimate's missed this entire chunk. Now he's stepped up, and if this fails, I think that's the end of his career. He doesn't get back into tier 1 after that. It feels a little bit unfair to use this guy as the potential scapegoat in a case like that. When you had someone like OC, who granted I don't think is the greatest, but at least he comes with a little bit of experience.
Yeah,
and why didn't they go for something like that? What was I still can't get over the thinking here.
All right, I'll give you the spicy segment that will get the headlines. So here's how it goes.
Yay.
When you say, isn't it unfair? I'd say like yes and no. It's unfair in the sense that you are right. The actual most likely outcome is this guy plays. I agree with fl0m. I actually think the hardest job in all of Counter-Strike is to go from like tier 1.5 AWPA to tier 1 AWPA, because the point is it's a kill or miss gun, and you're now playing against Monacy, Z. Like you're just going to get farmed. People will know the classic examples, OC, Farley, Mantu, all these people were good at their level. And then when you put them against the absolute best, they just didn't look as good. And by the way, there's a reason they all aren't in top teams anymore. So I do think the problem is it's a massive jump up. And almost certainly when this lineup fails, when people go down the lanes, right, no one is going to hate on Twistzz, even if he's not as good as IGL, because they know he could still be a good player, right? No one's going to hate on JKS. He's been out of the sea. It's obviously going to be this guy. And he's also the opposite. Every time you miss, it looks really bad. As a rifler, you can miss and do the 2 bullets into the guy and still contribute. You know what I mean? So I do feel like in a way it's unfair, but here's why it's not at all unfair. Because you just said it there. He didn't actually earn this spot. I'm just going to say that right now. He didn't do anything in tier 1 million. That means anyone was even like, he must be in a top team. Bro, forget even Team Liquid. No one even wanted this motherfucker on OG. Like, nobody cares that this guy lived or died as far as I can tell. So, in a way, I would spin it the other way and go, it's a bit unfair in the sense, why does this fucker get to get a Team Liquid salary? Why does he potentially get to go to the major? Why does he get to sit next to prime Twistzz and Naf and go, hey, I am an equal teammate. Oh, and what's that? I have the most expensive gun. Please actually hand me the gun, please, Twistzz. I'll be taking, like, in a way, that's unfair. I'll give you an analogy. If you remember back in the day, that old company, Face It, dead now, of course, they work with fucking ESL traders. So they, back in the day, held a major in my home country, the United Kingdom. It was called Face It London, wasn't it? But they didn't hire me, the greatest analyst of all time from the UK, major in my home country. And what they did instead, if you remember, Flom, is bizarrely they gambled and hired Daps. Do you remember this? They brought Daps in to just do like some desk code. And he even admitted himself he'd never been an analyst before. He said, I'd never done this role. Now, in that scenario, you might think, hey, Daps, he's like a thinker. He could, yeah, you're right. That's all right. But he was never going to learn it all in one event. So I would say in that scenario, if you're Daps, you definitely can't complain. Because get the fuck off the desk and let a hero in. Let me in the game. I can score, coach. He's never even played striker before. So in that analogy, yeah, it's a bit unfair, but it's also fair because at the end of the day, if you were granted that position and then you fail, well, in a way, you should also turn and blame whoever sort of dropped you in the deep end, if you know what I mean. Like, they didn't exactly give you a chance to scale up. Because I also agree, like, if anything, isn't that an indictment of what a weird move this is, that he did somehow get to skip all these levels, but he isn't m0NESY. The difference was, if you saw m0NESY on We Play Academy, no one could know he'd be this good, but you could tell he could be really good, though. Like, the eye test was crazy. Nobody's ever hyped this guy. So in a way, I see what you mean. I on the personal side, I agree it'll be brutal for this guy if like Lockie and Astralis, he's only ever known for being boosted up, hated on, and then kicked the fuck out. But I'd also just say there's a world where he never ever had his name mentioned on any show like this or any broadcast ever, at which point in time, maybe that's worse. Who can know? You'd have to wait up in the afterlife in many ways. Look forward to the episode of Feed the Trolls from the Afterlife, where before he either ascends into Nirvana or gets caught in the wheel of samsara, me and Tech Girl will ask Ultimate if he did indeed enjoy his time on Team Liquid, whether it was fair or not. So, forthcoming episode.
Yeah, I try to do everything I can to forget the London major. That was
okay. I think a lot of people do, mate. A lot of people do.
So that's
it was
where
bad.
I start with that. You asked me about the London major. I was like, I try to not remember. I was like, maybe he worked there. Like, I remember the Jason Lake tweet. That's the peak of that.
Sure.
I mean, not to derail off of Ultimate, but like, you said something that really like triggered me actually, which is you were talking about how earlier you're talking about how you have Prime Twistzz, right? And then we have NIP did this same exact thing with Device. You remember? They signed that Device guy and then they rotated through Academy players for like what, 6 months? That roster looked like a clown car. I mean, it still kind of does, but like when they had Device, you're like, what are they doing? It feels like the same. You have that same feeling with the roster. It's like you have Prime Twistzz, you have Naf, who still looks incredible, by the way. He always gets like, I know he's a quiet guy, but I feel like he's so good, you don't even talk about him. Like he's such a staple. You're just like, yeah, you have Naf. Like he's gonna do his thing. JKS, fan favorite. I think he's solid. Not quite as Naf level, but I think he's really solid. YEKINDAR, absolute. I don't know what the hell's going on. That man has lost all. I don't know. He's lost all his confidence. But it just feels like when you sign a player like Ultimate, it's like I don't. He didn't earn it. What are we doing here? You have a couple players that are just like in peak form. It just feels like you're wasting not only their time, your time, but also you're giving a guy a shot where you might completely devalue his stock. And then 6 months, he's going to have to regrind back to where he just was, where he was just starting. And then he's going to have to start all over again. It just feels like a lose, lose, lose across the board, unless some miracle happens and all of this stuff that we can't see outside looking in just magically works. Like that's literally what you're hoping for. You're hoping Twistzz becomes a star IGL where he doesn't lose any individual form, which nobody's done.
No one
I lose
ever.
I pull my fucking hair out. Thank God I got a lot of it, because every team does this. They're like, oh yeah, Electronic, he's smart. You know, he can secondary call. Like, have we not learned from Alu, like calling twice in a major, going, I could do this, and then cutting like, have we not learned yet? Everybody's just like, yeah, we could do this. I got this. I call it a couple times. Like, no, stop. And it's like, it's not a knock on the players. Like, Twistzz is incredibly intelligent. You have to be that successful on that many different teams, the roles that he's in. Like, it's not, I don't know if it's like an ego thing or like players just like, I don't know what it is, but I don't know what the fascination with these incredibly talented players is in wanting to IGL. Somebody just, this is where you need MindBodyEsports coming in and politely just smacking them and telling them, no, you're this, like, be this, don't try to be something else. And that's what, like, the whole move just kind of coming back around just feels so bizarre, because you're wasting everyone's time is what it feels like. And as a fan, that's what it feels like. And I realized that maybe it wasn't, you know, their plan, but it doesn't matter, because that's how it feels and that's where we're at. So no matter how you try to cut it, like, this is where we are, and I don't know, it just doesn't feel great.
Flom, do you think it's like you mentioned earlier, they put so much investments into the super team with Cadian, and then obviously whatever happened there happened, and it happened in a bad way. This feels like a bit of an emergency. Let's, like you said, it's a stopgap, get us through the next 6 months, and then we can start rebuilding. Saying all of that, though, would it not have made sense if we're going to stopgap and we're kind of just going to work with what we have, purely just let YEKINDAR call again? Like, why would you take your superstar player who's looking the best he's ever looked and put him in the IGL role?
First thing this episode, I think he wants it. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. I mean, he hasn't come out and plainly said it necessarily.
Behind the scenes, it's claimed that it's literally him who wants to do it.
Just him
and
talking
it was either like,
Thorin.
do this or he leaves maybe or something, you know.
Like, I remember the interview he had with you, Thorin. Like, he was talking about like how he likes having that voice, which isn't like, I'm not saying it's bad, and I know, like, we've literally seen this script so many times with these players where like the secondary IGL star player is just like, you know what, I think I can do that. And some players do eventually transition into that IGL role, but it's more so like when their individual ability isn't as like potent. And I think some players are jumping the gun to go to that role too early. And that's what I was just referencing. Is like, I don't know if it's like an ego thing. I don't know if it's like, I don't know what causes it. It's like infectious. So everybody gets it. Like, if you're in that role, it just happens. And for Twistzz, I think he wants the role. I think that's why YEKINDAR isn't the one IGLing. I think after how poorly it went with YEKINDAR, I think he's lost all confidence. I mean, it's a shame too, because he was one of the most explosive. Because you imagine if you actually had even 95% YEKINDAR that when they first signed him with current form Twistzz, and then you just had one person to steer the ship, how terrifying that would be.
I mean, the joke is they probably could have kept that Cadian lineup and they would have been like in the finals of tournaments. Right? It would be pretty good.
Don't remind me. Internally, I think Twistzz wants to do it. I think that's where it's coming from. I can't logically really, outside anyway, like, come to any conclusion where YEKINDAR's the IGL, because I think Twistzz just wants the job. Yeah.
I've got the analogy for you. I actually think, because I keep always drawing this contrast, because another very similar phenomenon that's in the same wheelhouse is when the secondary AWPer goes, I'll just be the primary AWPer. And you notice how many times in history that's also happened, Flom. And what the secondary AWPer always forgets, I always explain it this way. The way you realize what they're not getting is, because like a secondary caller, they get to cherry pick when it's an appropriate moment to have this impact in IGL or AWP. They're only seeing the top end, the best part of doing that role, because they're doing it as a tourist. What they're missing is, as an AWPer, the best example is if you use the old 1.6 economy, where it was way stricter. We didn't have all those like semi-automatics and Galils and stuff that everyone bought. Everyone used to back then either basically proper save with pistols, or you do like a full buy with all guns. You never even did half buys usually. So I always used to say, when you're the secondary AWPer and you just like wait until it's like, I don't know, just CT side, and you just on one site, you're just feeling it that day. Maybe the AWPer on the enemy side is not very good. You just pick it up, you get a few kills. You might think, hey, I could be the AWPer. You haven't AWPed yet. AWP is when you go to LAN, you start the game on CT side, does too. You lose the pistol round, you lose the 2 ecos. It's the first buy round. You spend your entire buy, if you know the 1.6 economy, all you'll get from that is the AWP armor and no nades. You then have to literally go and get kills. Otherwise, that entire process starts again. And thus far, you've got 0 kills in the game. And you've spent all that money. That's when being an AWPer, you'll find out, do you actually want to be an AWPer or not? Because the difference is, someone like Kenny S just knows that's open. So he'll be like, yeah, just give me the gun, go for it. When you're the guy who does that and you miss on that first gun round and you get popped instantly, you'll start thinking, maybe I go back to rifle. So same thing with being an IGL. You're thinking, I saw a moment in the round. If I can speak instead of just whatever he's going to call, I can tell you the right thing if we just do this. Like when I entered, they actually had like a setup far back. We could sort of like use the extra flash or something. When you say that, you feel like, oh, it's genius. I could be the... No. IGL is when you're on like, you've just lost your map pick on LAN. You're on their map pick. It's your 5th best map. And you're starting on T side and the first 3 executes you've called all failed completely. All your teammates are looking at you. None of them have any ideas. And they're all looking at you like, go on then, dickhead, figure it out. And they don't even know that like you're having a couple with it on the fly. That's when you find out IGLing fucking sucks. Because the key thing to point out, as I did with the AWP example, is that reality, by the way, is happening to even the best IGL. Even Carrigan's having a game where that happens, or fucking Glaive back in the day. They're all having that game that really sucks. But the player playing the game, he won't see that. He's just shooting someone here, having an aim duel here, rotating. Yeah. There's a bit, one extra man in the site when I tried to win the clutch. He doesn't see that part. So I think they just don't realize like what the everyday slog is like and all the mad downside to those gigs too.
100%. You go from like always thinking like in your micro situation, right, of like every little thing that you can do individually to make an impact, like how to find that like 1% edge on somebody. Even like on a bigger scale, you might understand like what they're doing on the site setup or like whatever if you're attacking it. But as an IGL, you're never thinking of like, what can I do for me? Like, what am I doing? You're always looking at like the whole team collectively, where until you're like plucked out and put into the IGL position, you're always looking at a smaller window of that.
Yes.
And it's hard to, because like, and this is what I mean is like, Twistzz, for example, I'm sure he probably can IGL, but I guarantee you as soon as he does, he's going to individually drop off, and that's going to be more impactful to Liquid. And somebody just has to explain that to him. It's like, dude, you probably can make some great calls. Like you probably can even lead. But what they're going to lose on the flip side, you're not making up with YEKINDAR right now.
Yes.
Ain't no way. YEKINDAR's not the one stepping up, picking up your slack. Ultimate's not going to be the one doing it. And JKS is incredibly serviceable, but like he's not going to be the guy that's the difference maker, I think, when it comes to this discussion in that sense. Like you're the guy, Twistzz. Like you got to be the guy because they don't have anybody else to be the fucking guy. So I think it's going to be, I think you're absolutely right though. Like the analogy with the ops are good. Like and it's just a trap because players taste that success with those calls and it just feeds the beast. It feeds the beast, feeds it more and more and more. And they might even outside recognize like what we're saying right now, but until you actually do it, it's the buck stop like, or it always stops with you. Right. And like, it's such a different feeling and it's going to change how you look at the game. And I think Launders used to have this take, and I think it's pretty good, is like a lot of people, once they start to IGL, they actually can't go back usually to being themselves, because you go from a player that's looking at that small window all the time, finding the edge, getting the edge, making an impact. And then you look at it as a whole, it's really hard to just get focused back on your like lane, so to speak. And I don't know, that would be what I'm actually most worried about for Liquid long term is
for sure.
Twistzz does this, and it's not to say he's going to be washed, but is he the difference of like that X factor? Does he make that same play, like that he made off of Twinkie on Nuke, right? Where he's calling it to Kerrigan. Does he do that kind of stuff still? Maybe he does, not as much, like whatever, you don't know. I just think there's a mental side to that where it's hard to switch it on and off. We're not robotic, we're humans. So like once you start thinking like that, it'll be really interesting to see if Twistzz, let's just say this is a stopgap and they want to make a change after. It's like, do they pick up an IGL? And if they do, what is Twistzz going to look like now? Like, is he still the same exact player? That to me, long term, is really the scariest part of this entire prospect of this roster is what does Twistzz look like? You're wasting some of his prime years right now. And on the flip side, you could be changing, mentally how he's looking at the game where he's maybe not as effective later on.
I've got a mad angle for you here that no one for some reason ever brings up, Tech Girl. And this is actually insane because there's a very obvious specific reason why specifically Team Liquid has done this again. And the reason why, as soon as I say it, it'll be so obvious, is who is the greatest in-game leader, fl0m, in the history of Team Liquid CS?
Nitro.
Easy. It's Nitro, right? The guy won the Grand Slam all those years where they were top. Remember, he used to be their aggressive star rifler, and then he switched to in-game leader and actually was the rare exception to the rule that made it. He never had to go back. He did completely switch to be an IGL. He embraced it. Obviously, his game went down, but he understood that. He essentially was almost like a Phil. Remember, he would like up CT side overpass, but he'd be an Acorn on a different side. He's essentially the unicorn. And unfortunately, I actually think it made Team Liquid think that's a blueprint as opposed to that's what you call lightning in a bottle, mate. That's crazy that worked. So if you think about it, they've now tried it 2 more times. They had YEKINDAR. Now they got Twistzz. It's the same fucking story. And the problem then, and even, by the way, I'll even say the other thing that was extremely rare about Nitro's case is normally when you hear a story like Carrigan in 1.6 was a star, but then in CSGO he's an IGL. Yeah, but that's because he knew, he'll even tell you, I thought about retiring from CSGO because I sucked as a star player. The difference is Nitro is actually an example. He didn't willingly choose to be IGL. If you remember, he did it briefly before they got Stanislaw from Optic, and then they made that super team with Optic Stanislaw. It didn't work. And so again, while they even still had Stanislaw in the lineup, if you remember, they just swapped Nitro to do it, sort of like, oh, I'll do it for a while if I have to. So he's also the only example I've ever seen as someone who didn't sort of hard commit, but ended up staying in the role and doing it. Because that's the other thing I always worry about is essentially, here's what I would say if I was talking to Twistzz or Liquid about this topic. It's like, bro, if you were this sick, Twistzz, and you're going to be the next Glaive, then why the fuck were you willing to sit next to Cadian as he did it? Like, shouldn't that have been your initial billing? Was like, hey, I'm coming back to Liquid, but I want to be an IGL. Let's set the team up this way. Get me this up. Like, that's what I mean. The idea you're sort of doing it when you have to. Nitro did it, but I think he has to be the exception. And for me, he's the outlier. You wouldn't consider him because I agree with you. If you look at the pattern of the people who even willingly did it, the Shoxes, the Alus, almost every one of them, it didn't work. And actually, I agree also. Most of them never went back to being a star afterwards. It's kind of like a double whammy.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly hard to go back. I mean, I'm not gonna go in circles about it, but I just think you get stuck in that mode and you can never switch it back off. It's stuck. Yes. You're just kind of, I don't want to say ruined, but it's very hard to just kind of pick up where you left off.
Do you think we'll ever know what actually happened with that super team lineup with Cadian? Because I feel like this is so messy. And when I look at this, to me, this feels like a situation of it was so bad that Twistzz was like, well, fuck it, I'll do it, but like get rid of it. Like that's what we.
You know what?
That's
Shall I do it?
Kind of feels like.
Shall I just give you some heat rocks? Shall I give you some? I'll pass. Here's a few hot potatoes. I'll pass you. Right. So here's some things I heard. So first of all, I've alluded to this before, but I'll be a bit more explicit. You know, I've said on a few shows now something that might be like really sort of like, let's say like suggestive to people, which is I say that after what I've heard behind the scenes, all of a sudden I've sort of 180'd who I think was right and wrong in the whole stabby heroic Astralis drama, because obviously everyone was going hard against them because everyone loves Cadian, right? And we all saw him as this heroic figure, journeyman, battles his way through, he makes his own team, he grinds up, he gets all these pieces that weren't even top players, they all get to the top together, he's doing speeches, guys, when I was young and I was at the BYOC at DreamHack, when I was 17, I never would have. It's like a Hallmark movie. Who isn't cheering for this guy? The problem goes, at the end, you all think in the Hallmark movie, he was then betrayed by these snakes down in Yabi who were just greedy little, fucking young Danish stars who had no appreciation for what this man had done for them and the father figure that he'd been. And they didn't understand fl0m. They just wanted to star fuck and be off with Device in Astralis and be big boy. Except it turns out that if you notice what was implied by the way that went down, what was implied was they sort of did an ultimatum, like, I won't play with this guy, Cadian, specifically. So whether that means you have to kick him out of Heroic, which is what they were going to do in theory first, or we just leave, that doesn't actually imply, like, they just woke up one day like idiots, like, fuck Cadian. It actually implies something happened relationship-wise, dynamic-wise, that essentially you reached an impasse. I've heard the same thing happen in Team Liquid. I've heard basically Cadian, let's just say it's not that he's fake, it's that he's just showing a different side to himself on camera. I've heard in the team he is mega controlling, like both in terms of the round, like he really is trying to do, like I always said, it's like he thinks he's living the biopic Cadian, an underdog story, but while he's living it, like he's not watching the movie, he's actually living it and acting out like there's a director. You get that shot? You get my best side? Like play again better. So he's doing that, right? So first of all, I've heard in the game, he really is just trying to make like hero calls all the time. And even though, by the way, again, 1 or 2 hero calls are brilliant. No one wants to live in a game where we're just actually pawns. You just decide everything every round. Like, we want structure. Like, if I'm Twistzz, bro, I've been a HLTV top 20 player all these years. Like, how about give me my position and I'll decide when I get the kills or when I go, you know. So first of all, star players don't like that. And then the other thing I'm going to throw out there goes like this. I've also heard, this is why the stabby thing started to change. I've also heard, despite being potentially a good like in-game leader in the sense of reading the round, calling around, knowing what to do himself, I've heard he just didn't have very good sort of what you'd almost call like man management skills. Like I've heard basically he's really annoying if he argues with you and just like fucking like pissing people off and getting in a mad argument. He's not actually not. I know everyone thinks he's like the ultimate captain. I've heard he was like mad fucking provocative and he couldn't get along with people. And so these things all combined with the massive underperformance in the results. By the way, it doesn't help that he himself was way worse in CS2. He wasn't that fucking guy from CSGO. And I'll just throw this in there. I always thought in CSGO, the area where Cadian pushed the boat out a little bit too far for me personally was brought on T side because he's the AWPer. He would sometimes call around like he was simple. Like he would get like a setup where he'd freeze like mid on Mirage. Then he'd get the boost and he'd be taking the shot like you're setting up Prime Simple to like open the round and win you the major. And I'd be like, bro, yeah, you're the IGL as well. That's going to come off really badly. And the problem he had was this. He maybe got away with it just enough in that heroic. In CS2, he was never going to get away with that at all. And if you notice, he still had the AWP a fucking lot in CS2, I'll tell you that. So I think a mixture of that like Maui narrative of like main character syndrome mixed with like, I think essentially they didn't know it, but like the players and him, their style and his style is like chalk and cheese. It sounds to me like Liquid really did just want like a guy who comes in, you set up a playbook, you have a bunch of assistant people get to have input, you're accountable, they can argue back and forth or whatever. So yeah, it's like I've revealed too much there. Notice I didn't say the names of whoever did or didn't like the things, but basically that from what I've heard from multiple people, yeah, like now you can see why they couldn't continue on because it just got to the point where again the impasse was just we won't play with Cadian. So at that point, he has to go. And by the way, he's essentially, on some level, set up all the problems of this episode because the downside was he was simultaneously AWPer and IGL. So now you have to replace possibly the 2 most important roles of the game. Thing. Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean...
So you must have heard some of that stuff, Flom. It must be around the scene as well.
I heard it, but like, I mean, not to sound... I just feel like, yeah, that's obvious even outside looking in. It didn't take a fucking genius to figure that one out. Like that, but it's kind of what was the order of operations? That's the real problem. We'll never know outside looking in. Is like, did they sign Cadian first and then tell him he gets the keys to the castle, or did they sign Twistzz first? And those types of things in this really matter. And to defend Cadian a little bit, I do think no matter what you say about him, Broke was shit before he was there.
He was the main reason they succeeded. Of course, of course.
No, but I'm saying, like, think of how he found success, though, right? Like, look at the pieces now that he left behind. Sure, okay, some of those players in their roles look stronger than maybe we gave credit to them for, like, now. But even now, it's not like they're all riding off to the sunset with tons of success. They're all doing incredibly worse. Stalin looks like an absolute fraud. So with Yabby getting carried by Device, who was IGLing them. They look like it's Device and friends in Astralis camp. Heroic looks like they're picking up the pieces and don't look bad, but if Nerds doesn't show up, they can't beat anybody in the top 10. True. So you have a guy where, and this is what I mean, is like the order of operations matter, because if Cadian like was brought to the team and it was like, this is your team, the way he's found success is doing exactly what you just described. Sure, like, you know, is it controlling and you shouldn't call that way with Twistzz? Absolutely. But then if you're Liquid, why did you do this? Right?
Yeah, that's true.
You set everyone up for failure, like everyone. So it's, you know, Cadian is clashing with them because he's calling in the way that he found the most success with. And he literally brought a team from nothing and his own career and skyrocketed it based on what he was doing. There's no way he was going to change. Flip side of that, you have Twistzz, who's now been with Kerrigan, had success with Liquid, where they play completely different. I mean, the Grand Slam Liquid team, as an NA fan, that was, you want to talk about lightning in a bottle. That team was ridiculous. And you talk about the things that they did, it wasn't even strats. They just shot you out of the server. We've never seen that. Everybody's like, yeah, you can't win on talent alone. No, those 3 months of Liquid, holy shit.
True.
You watch that, like, sure, Simple's great, Zai was great, but as a team, what that Liquid team was doing was disgusting. So you put that into Twistzz mindset now, right? And these are going to be the 2 people that you need to have on the same page
Sure.
moving forward. It's never gonna work. And so, do I blame Cadian? No, like maybe if he said, yeah, I'm gonna make it work, and I realize I have to like change how I'm calling or something, maybe, but we'll never know that. And on the flip side, Twistzz, you know, not to try to hold things against him, but like in that little retreat they did, you know, Twistzz was like, dude, I really want to play underneath you. It's like,
Yep.
Twistzz is a smart guy. Surely you knew Cadian was going to be very heavy handed, right? I feel like I did.
You should have. I agree.
Like I'm not smart. Like I knew Cadian was going to be telling everybody what to do, unless he was explicitly told, like, going to this is going to be different. Like, we know you had success this way, and we know you're Cadian, but actually, we don't want you to be Cadian. We just want you to just tell people what to do loosely and have an op. And that's the failure. I mean, it's the levels of success that each player had, the ways that they had it were completely different. So you have style problems, and then you just add into the fact that I think their expectations were absolutely out of whack. I think, look at every international team that had no identity trying to build from the ground up. Nobody made a team successfully in 6 months.
Yeah, it's
nobody.
Really hard.
The only team that we even saw do that was Vitality, and they didn't even do full international. They had Danish, French, and then eventually they made tweaks to that roster. They brought in Spinks. That's when things really started to align.
You also
a
had
little
the
bit
player
more.
of the year as well. Like, that helps.
Well, I know. I'm not trying to brush over.
No, true.
I'm just trying to stay on the topic of international rosters. Yeah. If anything, it proves my point more. You had
it takes time to power up. Yeah.
And like the idea that Liquid went from 50th rank to basically top 10, and I would say their only real failure at the start of the year was that they didn't make the major.
Yep.
That is a
the
huge
timing
failure.
also fucked them. Yeah, the timing was really bad for that.
So I'm not trying to like gloss over it, but if you look at the context of their accomplishments and where they started, they actually were doing like
the placings
like,
were totally fine. Yeah, of course.
I don't.
They were in the playoffs every time.
But like you would just hear from the camp, it just felt like they were like supposed to be winning or something.
Yes.
I don't know where the level. That's why.
Well,
I get
f0m,
really
there's
mad
the other
at
detail. The other thing I also heard behind the scenes is people might know that story that before he joined Liquid, supposedly Twistzz had like the world as his oyster. He could stay in FaZe, or famously he could go to Vitality, was a main offer.
Yeah.
I've heard that because Liquid initially didn't have the results, I've heard that there's a world where maybe he could have gone Vitality at some time this year. Like, that was still on the table being offered to him. So unfortunately, I also think that will accelerate like what you're going to expect from, because in that scenario, if you're Twistzz, suddenly your choice isn't, do we change this lineup or is this good enough? It's like, hey, I could go to potentially a team where tomorrow I could win everything, or if I stay, it better be X, Y, and Z, or we better. I think if you look from his perspective, that makes sense, assuming that's all accurate, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that line of logic like makes sense. I just think if you think about it though, as a contextually for the whole team, no international teams ever had that level of success quickly.
Yes.
I don't want to say the word impossible, because I'm sure at some point we'll have lightning in a bottle with some team getting formed, and we're just like, look at them, they're amazing. But we've never seen it. I can't expect it. So I think that's where things got wrong, or is weird. Is I think Liquid, whatever they did, the vision between Cadian and Twistzz was wrong. Like, whatever they did, they didn't level expectations correctly. They weren't on the same game. Like, they had zero game plan together. They just had completely different ways of playing Counter-Strike. And who's right or who's wrong is really subjective. That's the more annoying part too. Is like, you can't really fault Cadian for being like, yeah, this is how I want to call.
All right, you know what? You've successfully done it, f0m. You've baited me. I'll give you another heat rock. Here's a reason why you might be able to blame Cadian. So obviously, if we're just making it really simplistic, like essentially he's like a feel IGL who likes to call off his reads versus like a play. No, the problem I've heard is it was really extreme. Like, I've heard basically people like Twistzz and YEKINDAR were actually literally helping design playbooks and stuff and looking over the most recent strats. And essentially, let's just say Cadian was ignoring that and just doing what he wanted anyway.
Yeah,
so unfortunately, that's also why I feel like they come to an impasse at the end where they were like, we just can't work with this guy. Because I get the vibe in that scenario. Again, if we go back into Cadian's perspective, you're right. Essentially, in a weird way, if this was a movie, the reason you would cheer for Cadian is it's an underdog story. It's a guy who's being told by life and his team and the game constantly, you're not it, bro. You aren't him. You're never going to be at the top. In fact, if you think of his career, everyone would tell you, one, stop AWPing. You're not a world-class AWPer. And two, AWP and IGL. Who the fuck do you think you are? No one's ever done it. And he was the only guy ever who, when everyone said no, actually was right and made it to the top. And by the way, he was in a major final, guys. He almost won a fucking major doing that. So in a weird way, you'd have to have a crazy self-confidence that does work, and that essentially you are smarter than everyone. But in this scenario, I think in that case, here's the thing. When you're the hot shit and maybe Twistzz has only met you at the bar at the after party every time, and then his team goes out early one time and he sees Heroic do well, and he goes, hey, Casper, you know, we should play together. When you have that convo and you're having 3 beers, you're not really thinking about the X's and O's, are you? Like, well, if I was not, how would you lead me? You're thinking of just all the positives and all the good things and all the vibes you've got going. But I agree with you. Like, part of me just thinks, what, were you just trying it for 2 months, Kid Twistzz? Like, you know, what was going on with this? Like, surely this was going to come up at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like, what were we really doing here? But, you know, and just to get a little serious with it is, I that's why I still think it's Liquid. Like, I look at the organization.
Oh, Liquid has to take the most responsibility, surely, yes.
Like sometimes, like, I feel like the players create a lot of the drama. And like, I'm not saying there's no drama here between the players that are probably making it worse. But, like, Liquid, I don't know what you did. Like, I don't know what you were doing there. Like, surely somewhere along the line you didn't communicate effectively to one of them. Surely, like, that's like to get a
put it this way, without giving another heat rock. I can only give you so many in one episode, but I have to save them up for the shows.
Okay.
But I'll tell you one thing that'll be very telling, which is people might know I don't just like Zeus the coach. I actually consider him a friend. He's someone I've known for many years. Spoiler: there's a reason why I haven't complained that they fired him too. Because essentially, like what you're inferring from, I do think there were also in structural and organizational things. And many times you could have taken a stop to this or fixed it earlier, and they clearly didn't, and they let it get as bad as possible. And then, yeah, I agree. The orc has to carry some of the bag. It can't just be Cadian.
Yeah, I think that's where we get focused on the players a lot. Yes. I feel like somehow the orgs always just are like, I mean, we talk about the orgs like not making good moves, but like we don't ever like hold them accountable for the situation that they created. So that's why I'm like, yeah, to me the buck stops with them, and I think like Liquid create a ticking time bomb through lack of communication more than likely anything, and expectations.
Do you know who I feel the most sorry for is like the MindBodyEsports guy that has to come in and deal with all the psychological bullshit that was going on there. Worth out of him. Yeah, you are definitely. I mean,
well, in the analogy, by the way, of his job being the sports psych type, you know, performance coach guys, I guess in this analogy, he's just gone from playing a normal game to like Dark Souls 2 or something. Like he's playing a fucking nightmare mode, isn't he? Like Jesus, bro.
He's got the new DLC.
Oh, exactly. It's like, fucking hell.
He thought he had it all figured out. That the DLC dropped is called Liquid. And you're like, holy shit. I wanted a challenge, guys, not this.
I only ever thought you got drama like that in like a women's team, but no, it's happening with all the boys as well. But let's talk about the one thing about Liquid that I'm actually very excited about, and I think a lot of people are, and that is the return of JKS. Come on, like this has been a long time coming. I feel like this was the perfect. We spoke about this here on Feed the Trolls. We were like, JKS is there. Take him. They did. This is a good thing, right? We're happy to see this player back in the mix, even if it is in a lineup where things could go horribly wrong, Thorin.
Yes, here's the thing. I actually think the JKS pickup reminds me, even though it's going to be totally different as a player, of when Heroic added Dexter recently as the AWPer, right? Because it was the same scenario. They were both sat out there for ages, but you know they're both good. In fact, they're both specialists at what they do. And you think, why are these guys not getting picked up? And part of the reason why in both cases, as far as I know, is they themselves know their value. So they weren't just going to go and join some bad team and have to sort of grind all the way up like you would at the beginning of your career. So they were all gambling that like I get a good enough offer that I've waited too long. And in the case of JKS, by the way, I think he almost waited too long. I think this was almost like the last chance saloon for me. So the key thing about these players is I actually think the reason I cite both of them is if you know their games, I actually think it's almost guaranteed they will both be close to their best again one day. Like they're just two players where like it's clearly the role they want to play. They have the mindset for it. They have good work ethic. They even have the ego to believe they can be good enough. So I think it's brilliant that they've signed him. I know obviously he hasn't played for a while and hasn't played very much in CS2. So people are going to sort of reserve judgment and wonder, is he actually good? I think for that one, I don't even worry about all the rest of Liquid, of Twistzz, IGL and Ultra. I just hope that the premise with JKS is we are going to give him time. Whether it's this lineup or not, like maybe in this lineup he's still working his way back. Maybe there's other problems. But I think if you give that guy long enough and you can find the appropriate space, there's no overlap, he's not stepping on Naf's toes. If you can make it work structurally, I think he will. He's one of those players I think is a slam dunk to get good enough. Now, look, if you know his career and what he was like in Renegades and 100 he's not actually going to be like a HLTV top 10 player. Like at his best, he was probably, I think there was even a year where he was like, you know, like 20th or 19th or so. And that's the sort of peak he could have. But he's not that, you're not Renegades. You're not making him your star. You're bringing him in to be a really good role player like he was in G2. I think actually, as we've seen from the whole experiment they're doing with other players that are putting in anchors, I think people are going to learn eventually. Anchor's another role you don't just make someone do who doesn't want to do it. Like, you have to really have the mindset for that role. So I think JKS is money in that sense. I think he's a brilliant addition. And in fact, since obviously he stupidly called himself JKS, even though his actual fucking surname is Savage, I'd have called myself, I don't know, Savage. But then again, that's marketing. I think what we should do is this. If you remember JKS, I want you to just remember this. It's an acronym. It's not really. I'm making it one. JKS stands for Just Kills Suckers. Because the best thing about JKS is the flaw of his game. Don't look and think he's going to be the best player in the world. The mega thing about JKS is if you put him against worse players or in spots where he has favorable, he's so consistent in my opinion. It's why I actually found it bizarre in G2 that people said he was inconsistent. I know if they mean in terms of like overall stats, because he was having events where out of the anchor position, he was doing like a 1.2 rating. Like, that's just not sustainable in theory. Although Jim Fat somehow does it himself, but I don't fucking know how he does that. He's 17, whatever. He's probably on some Finnish fucking, who knows, Moomin Joss or something. I don't know. You figure it out. So, but no one else can do that. So I actually personally think if you want a player to sort of stabilize your team, much like NAF, another player where they just get it done. They're not the best player in the world, but I tell you what, the flaw of their game's mega. So this part, I do think it's a slam dunk. I love this part. The rest of it, I'm very skeptical about. I hope not only is this part good, but this guy gets to stay. I hope in 2 years we're talking about maybe a different team Liquid, but still got JKS in. I also think, by the way, what a good player. Like another player that's had a very tortured career, considering he just seems like he's just a good player.
Yeah. No, I think JKS is a great pickup. I mean, just it's almost like you have like the two players are exactly the same, but in the perfect way. Like NAF and JKS together. I mean, NAF is the same way. I could tell you from playing against NAF, like when that man, like you describe JKS this way, but it's how I describe NAF as well. Like he doesn't like headshot you instantly. You just fall over. Like I don't know how to describe it. It's like every body shot just hits, and like you're just like, well, all right, like yeah, you just tip the cap. You're like, you outplayed me, but it feels that way every time. And that's how JKS is too. Is he just gets his, like he does what he's supposed to, but so efficiently. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect him on this Liquid roster because it made too much sense. Like, and I, and
inadvertently the most BM thing ever said on this show, but all right.
But like it made so much sense. Like, and you know, you summed it up perfectly because Thorin, because you probably described how I felt, like without realizing it, which is I kind of forgot about him. Like, I didn't see a Reddit post. I mean, you know, everybody likes to give Reddit a hard time because they adore JKS and like, but. Honestly, I just kind of, I really was starting to forget JKS was even available out there as an option. So I'm with you 100%. I think I don't want to see him just like play now. I think he would be a great staple. Imagine you have NAF and JKS as your anchors, like
baller
for the like, yeah, like I mean, unless something crazy happens, I just see that being so consistent. That's a great way to build your team. Like it's just a perfect foundation. Like I don't have to worry about my sites. I just have to find people to run around and get along that can talk to each other. Easier said than done, I guess, based on. But it's, I mean, you know, it's just great. Like they're just two anchor pillars. Like they're exactly what they're supposed to be, like as personalities and in the server. Like I don't know what more you could want if you're Liquid. So great pickup. I really don't have too much to add just because it's good. Like just give them time, I guess.
Oh, by the way, the one thing everyone always forgets as well is, and it's always Maui that references, but such a good point, is the other thing, if your team Liquid specifically about signing JKS that's OP, is because he's from fucking Australia, you can still keep playing that game they're playing where they can take whatever RMR spot they want. Like, that's actually even like a mad, like inadvertent upside to him too.
Yeah. Pick and choose wherever you want to go. You're just like, all right, yeah, I feel like playing this one this time. All good. I mean, we all know where they're going to go. But
it's
the option's nice, I guess.
True.
It's always nice to have the choice. Okay, so jury's out on Ultimates, but the other pieces of Liquid, if YEKINDAR can find a little bit of his past form, the pieces are actually pretty solid when you take a look at it. Like, The question is now, do we really doubt it so much with the Twistzz calling and YEKINDAR? I mean, does anyone think YEKINDAR will ever find his form again?
Here's the saddest thing I've just realised is if you're the kid in like 5 years who's just on Wikipedia one day and you're looking up old players, you go, oh, Twistzz, what was he like back in the day? And you go on that results page and you click a result from this era, you're going to see the lineup and you're going to go, wait a minute, JKS, NAF, Twistzz and YEKINDAR. This ultimate guy must have been a sick IGL.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
because it looks baller, doesn't it? Like on paper, that
yeah.
already sounds fire flom. Like, I mean, if those players are at the real form, I'm in. That 4-man lineup sounds sick. The problem is, obviously, that's not the structure of the team.
Maybe that's the plan.
Yeah, exactly. And YEKINDAR, unfortunately, isn't 2022 YEKINDAR. Do you know what's sad, Flom? People know that I had a beef with him, so I don't like him as a person. And already, if you look at how he came into Team Liquid, even though I know he wasn't doing it intentionally malevolently, he did sort of walk into Team Liquid where nitro was sat as one of the most decorated IGLs of all time, and in interviews almost made it sound like he sunned him and was like, hey there, son, let me just teach you how CS works. I'm just going to explain to you how you work in C, and which is like, that's so condescending because obviously, like, the joke is literally nitro could have stopped playing that second and his resume still dwarfs anything YEKINDAR's ever done in his whole career. But with all that said, I actually do pull for this guy because I hate Flom when people who have, like him, eye test obvious talent, like crazy talent. This guy one time looked like he was going to be, not on Donk's level, but like one of the like generational entry players and like playmakers and someone who would like the idea is if you'd have paused in 2022, everyone would have promised you in 10 years, this guy has like an insane frag movie of like all the best guys. So the idea of the next 2 years, he sort of tanked them by doing this IGL experiment. That is actually a bomber. Like part of me does pull for the talent and the potential to be manifested and to see that again, especially because like we were saying earlier, bro, if you could ever have Prime Twistzz and Prime YEKINDAR together, what? And then you've also got like NAF as bro, you'd be cooking. You could like, that's like a major winning lineup there.
Yeah, no, especially in CS2, where I feel like, you know, unless you're Monacy right now, I feel like the op isn't as like dominant, like with the economy stuff, you know, a bunch of different things. That's a whole nother rant. But I just, God, the YEKINDAR thing. You know, to add some context though, with the Nitro YEKINDAR thing, you know, I'm not trying to defend him, but European CS was far ahead of North American Counter-Strike.
No, you had a point. I just meant the way it was presented. I would have gone out of my way to sort of be, you're a legend, you know, all that jazz.
Yeah. And then also like in interviews from other, I think it was Leisure John at the time was like also really hyping up YEKINDAR.
They all did it. Yeah.
So it definitely didn't help that narrative if you're like, what are you doing? Why, you know, that's Nitro. You know, but I think the problem, no matter what you want to do, is Twistzz IGLing, even if it goes well, YEKINDAR in current form and nothing we have seen right now is going to pick up any of that slack. I mean, that's just, that can change at a moment's notice. Honestly, like he might just wake up on the right side of bed one day and just realize he's YEKINDAR and just run up connector on Mirage and kill 3 people again, like we all remember. He's just like, that doesn't make any sense, but I guess he's doing it. But there's nothing to suggest he's going to do it. So I don't like it's. You're just hoping that somebody that once showed you their promise and their potential realizes it again. And how many times are we in this position in Counter-Strike and it never actually works? So it's not, and when you say things like this, you're painted as the person that's like preying on their downfall. It's it's quite literally the opposite though. Like you want to see them do well, but you have to also recognize that he hasn't been doing fuck all for like 1.5 years, 2 years. Like what are we doing? So the problem with Liquid is the output from YEKINDAR is just completely a question mark, and that's putting it lightly. And Ultimate is also in the same boat without any of the realized potential at any point. So we haven't even seen what he's doing. Like we have nothing to really go off of. And then you have YEKINDAR who's shown you what he's capable of and shown you exactly what he's not capable of at the moment. And you're just supposed to be excited about it. And I can't be. So that's where I sum up the Liquid rosters. You got 2 great anchors. You have Twistzz in prime form, who's now going to IGO, which has failed pretty much across the board every time you turn a star player into this. With a player that peaked in 2022, realized his potential, then became an IGL, lost his form, can't find his form again, and an unproven opper where oppers that have to make this jump, even when they're closer, like Thorin pointed out, fail tremendously. And I'll see you in 2025 when they make 2 roster changes and probably get a new coach. I mean, like I think that's what we're looking at here.
I wanted to say you were mentioning all those things with the lineup, but I was going to say, and we've also thrown a coach into the mix who I don't think actually
there's
has
also
the
that.
experience.
Dude, that's even crazy if you think about it, because if people don't know, the person mithR who worked with North, but in the era, not the sexy North era, unfortunately, he was with what's it, Mouse Sports, but again, not the one with Carrigan that you're thinking of really good. No, basically, he worked with a lot of big teams, but not the times when they were very successful. So, no, that's another thing to mention is think how, this is why I agree with what f0m said earlier. Like, if everyone complained, because I was very high on this original Team Liquid Super Team, I thought, look, yeah, I even said in my video, it's one of the most ambitious team projects I've ever seen. But you think to yourself, if this was to all work, though, like this is like a major winning roster, like with Cadian plus YEKINDAR, like you looked at it all, even the coach angle, we're bringing Zeus back, a guy who's won majors and did it using theory, like maybe he's the guy that can wrangle the big ego. There was all these reasons why. The problem is you've sort of done that again, but yeah, with the AliExpress version of a super team, because you've got Ultimate and Orpa where it's like he's never done anything. We've got JKS, but he's like has played like 2 seconds of CS2. We're making Twistzz our best player and most valuable asset, the IGL. We're bringing in like established player JKS, but it's possible he might even have a spot that's already played by NAF. And then we're also just going to throw in a coach who's totally inexperienced at this level, never worked with superstar players, and definitely never been part of an international super team. So it's like, not only could it go spectacularly wrong, but how the fuck are you supposed to figure out, like in the crime scene, what happened afterwards? Like, it's like there's about a million angles we're all coming from here. I even thought of another one, right, which is people are taking it for granted that if YEKINDAR and Twistzz, let's imagine those were the 2 players that might be vocal. Let's say they were in agreement of 1, fuck Cadian, and 2, maybe you should be IGL Twistzz. Let's say they all agreed with that when they were in the cafeteria gossiping as, like, you know, Cadian walked past and they went, well, you said, no, nothing, just talking to him about breakfast. Hey, see you later, Casper. See you in the train. Piece of shit. Right? When you're doing that, you can bond over that because it's neither of your problem. Think about it. Twistzz could be like, I'm having all this star performances, but it's not getting the wins. It's not impacting the win. And then YEKINDAR's like, and I can't have star performances because of this bloody guy. And they go, yeah, I tell you what, it's that fucking Cadian. The problem is that convo is great and resolves the issue when Cadian's there. What happens when you're in the same setting and YEKINDAR's still not good? Twistzz is worse. They turn to each other and it's like, well, we did this and it's also you doing this. Like, you know, that doesn't work then, does it? Like, and also, by the way, in this analogy, good luck to Ultimate because he's definitely getting that like joke behavior I just gave to Casper there. Yeah, every time he walks in the room, right, it's going to be classic Team Liquid passive aggression. As he like has a bad scrim and he goes, hey guys, I go to toilet, then have drink and then we play again. And they're like, yeah, sure, Ultimate. As he gets up and walks down the line of PCs, he just sees all those Steam boxes opening up for him and people like, and he's like, what are you talking? Oh, just don't worry about that. But you can see it's to one of the teammates. Like, what the, that's to Twistzz. Like, bro, this is like classic Team Liquid if you don't know what their locker room's like. So I'm actually really worried for that Ultimate guy. Like, I hope he knows what he's walking into. And also, definitely invest some of those checks into the S&P 500 index fund. You can't rely on that month to month, bro. We need to get a whole financial program for you. Like, let's make the best of this money, you tier 3 Polish ARPA. You know, like.
Hey, what imagine 6 months so he's just God's gift to Earth. That actually be
that would be. By the way, this episode will age really poorly if he actually turns out to be mega cracked out and just him hopping alone like fixes all the problems. I don't know.
Oh, he just found simple. Like, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say,
this way for comparison, I believe Richard actually did do a video where I think he did say when they were picking up Stewie as the stand-in, like they thought definitely won't win the event or some like, you know, like iconically no talk, like exactly the one line that comes back to burn you later, you know.
Say, God, you forget about it, Richard? Yeah, because he won it.
Of course.
Every time. No, I think the one, I mean, out of the cafeteria scenario you painted that was so beautiful, I do think the one thing that actually is almost probably worse is I think YEKINDAR is incredibly self-aware of how individually like off he is, but in the sense of like it's also his fault. Like, I don't know, the couple of the interviews that he see, like when I talked to them a little bit in Dallas, say what you want about the guy, he's incredibly self-aware. And almost, and I'm saying maybe.
Well, I've heard also, by the way, internally, they say that actually that IGL period did humble him, and it sort of made him realize, like, I can't just do anything I want, basically.
And I just think that's you know, it's good to be self-aware, it's good to be humbled, but you need to have your edge though too. Like, especially the way he played, like you need to have a little bit of just, I'm better than you. Like, I'm good. I know you're right here. I'm gonna take this fight, and I just feel like I feel like his ego's gone. Like, actually, I think this idea that he is the star rifler, I think he's trying to find his ego again. I think he's lost it. I think he's lost the plot. Like, I think he needs to realize that he actually is supposed to be the guy. He is him, and he needs to run it down at somebody, because this idea that he's James, like, I feel like he just sees himself as like some James disciple that went on a journey, and he's sitting here and he's trying to teach people the James way, like he's telling you about a religion. But like, dude, you're YEKINDAR, you're not James. Like, you did things that James didn't want you to do, and that was where you found most of your success. You have to find like that middle ground, and I think him being the IGL only amplified those feelings and probably made it worse. And there's nothing harder than trying to like find your, like, you know, you're missing some shots, hit the DM. You're doing like you don't have maybe the right nade usage, whatever. When you lose like your ego as a player like that, I don't know. It's really hard to come back from that. Like, somebody's got to be sitting there the whole day, just like, come on, buddy. Like, you got to push him into the deep end and just see where he goes. And if it hits, it hits. And if it doesn't, I think once again, Liquid's entire like performance is actually going to be like contingent on YEKINDAR more than anything, because I think Twistzz is going to be all right. I don't think he's going to be terrible, and they're going to need a guy that picks up. Like I keep saying, I know I'm like beating a dead horse, but there has to be a guy that isn't just good.
But this way, what you've been trying to verbalize, the f0m, what you're trying to verbalize that you didn't quite articulate earlier is people are taking for granted that Team Liquid did actually have all those playoff runs towards the end of the lineup. And the main reason why is Twistzz actually was like a top 10 player in CS. So what you're basically saying is if that is not there, in some ways he has an even harder IGL job than Cadian did. Like he's not going to have the big star, and he's going to have all these issues. I agree with you. It's taken for granted for sure, And I just don't see how logically we could get there right now. But no. 6 months, it could be age like poorly, and Ultimate's the best opera we've ever seen, and that'll fix a lot of problems. That'll make it look real good. So maybe the irony here is that after all that, and it was obviously YEKINDAR's ego and his own sense of self-importance that made him beef with me on Twitter. The irony is ultimately he actually needs to come full circle, and I will complete his Sith training and how to grow his ego. Because I'll tell you what, there's one thing I can do. Here's the thing, Sam. If there's anyone you want for a pep talk, it's me. I'm dialed in. I'll tell you the best in the world, mate. I'll get you up there. Don't worry about it.
Just tweet at him every day. Then we'll see what happens.
Every day.
Oh God!
We have spent
what have I done?
We've spent an entire hour talking about this Team Liquid roster, and all I've got from this is that MindBodyEsports is going to have to earn his paycheck in the next 6 months, because all of this falls to like all sorts of mental, confusing issues that he's going to have to deal with. So that's all on him. And we asked where the fall would be. Like there were all these moving parts. Maybe it's going to all come down to the sports psychologist, unfortunately. So sorry about that. But let us know what you think about the Liquid lineup in the chat, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Feed the Trolls.